enjoy my parenting. Actually, it's an art parents need to develop and cultivate. Take it as another job, a profession where you need to put constant effort and needs insight, hard work, teamwork, and patience. To take you to a step ahead, we, the College of GPs, invited our eminent speaker, Senior Professor Piyanjali Zoysa, who is a Senior Professor at the Department of Psychiatry, Faculty of Medicine, University of Colombo. She is a clinical psychologist by profession with a bachelor's honors degree in psychology, a master's degree in applied clinical psychology, and PhD. Her PhD was on child-directed violence, and she was the founder president of Sri Lanka Psychological Association. Further, she co-founded and hosts weekly TV programs on mental health in Rupahini. She has held several key positions and national and international level organizations on child rights and mental health. Before I hand over to Professor Piyanjali, let me remind you to keep your microphones muted throughout the lecture. And also, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat box so that we can answer it at the end of the session. And now I may hand it over to Professor Piyanjali Zoysa to start our program. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, Shobhavi. Shobhavi, I just got a message from one of the participants known to me that they can't hear. So I just want to check from the others. Can Shobhavi hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you very well.
Yeah. I was just wondering whether anybody else in the audience can tell us whether you all can hear us.
Can somebody unmute and say it?
Yes, we can hear you, madam.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can hear too.
Okay, so let's start. Let me just share my slides with you. Slides are also visible, Shobhavi?
Yes, that's very clear. You can go ahead.
Thank you. So today we have about 1 hour with us, and I will be talking to you about an extremely important topic, which I'm sure you all consider it as extremely important, and that's on parenting and how we can be skilled parents. Now, there are 2 reasons that why this topic is so important. One is, I would think that we spend so much of time getting trained to our profession. So most of you here would be doctors or in other professions. And, you know, for example, myself as a psychologist, it's a 10 years of training to become a psychologist. But parenting, which is such an important area, we don't actually get any training on, isn't it? We just do what our parents have done or just what we think should be done. And it could be very detrimental to the young people who we're rearing. So, and the second point is that as a psychologist, whenever I see adults who are going through some life issue and then they come to us into our clinics, I really sometimes wonder what if their parents or their teachers or the adults in their life was kinder to them, nicer to them, less dysfunctional towards them, what a different life this adult could be having now. So therefore, this webinar is to give you skills either as a parent or a grandparent or somebody working with children or a doctor who has practice where you see parents, to give them tips on how to make life so much better for our young children so that their life could be so much nicer. So my intention today is to talk to you on, because it's a lot of tough, I mean, you know, skillful parenting, Shobhavi and I was speaking, it's so many things, and so many of you have put in questions that I should talk on, but there's so much, right? So I just want to talk to you about some key areas. So first of all, I want us to benchmark the qualities a child should have if they're considered mentally healthy, because that's what a parent should aim for. Second, I will talk to you about the importance of being a role model for your child. Thirdly, I'll be talking to you about how to discipline your child. Fourthly, about how to communicate with your child. And fifthly, how you can manage your parental stress. The other topics that I have listed here is not made for today's webinar because we don't have time simply because of that. Right. So let us benchmark where we want our children to be at. Because if you don't have that benchmark, we don't know where they are going. We are like a rudderless boat kind of a thing. Now, in our society, particularly traditional societies like Sri Lanka, we place such great emphasis on a child passing O-levels. Like for tomorrow, parents who've got children in O-level class would be on pins, to say literally, or we know that children as young as in Montessori class goes to tuition. So there's so much of emphasis on academic achievement. We think that if we can get our child into university, into a vocational program, into a national school, pass the scholarship exam or the O-level and A-level, that's it. I mean, those are important because we do know that qualifications, education attainment is important to get into jobs. But how many people do we know in our lives who've got multiple degrees who are so dysfunctional? I mean, as a psychologist, we come across so many people all the time who tell me their own personal histories. And I'm amazed at how many of these people have qualifications, but may I please ask people to kind of mute your mics, please? That would be nice. Thank you. And though they may be having all these educational qualifications, as a human being, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's amongst their friends, whether it's amongst their colleagues at the workplace, or their families, with their spouses, with their children, they really are left wanting to be a better person. Because of that, we really need to see, well, is it just education attainment we want in a child? We know as psychologists that research have shown over and over again that just because you give your child education and give your child a university degree, for example, is not going to make that person productive or successful in their career. There will be a limit that person can go to. The reason is, in this day and age, just knowledge, a degree, and a set of skills is not sufficient for your child to be successful. The child should have certain personality qualities. Because even us, right, like if you look at people whom we work with in the long run, we keep long-term career relationships with people who we can work with easily. There are many people who are highly educated, skilled, and knowledgeable, but because they're difficult to work with, we let them go over time. So your child, if your child has to become, if you want a child to be successful in their life and career, your child needs to have these 4 personality qualities, which we call in psychology emotional intelligence. So let's see what they are, and let's see whether your child has these qualities. If the child hasn't, you need to work on that, okay? The first quality of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Is your child or the child in question aware when they are angry, when they are sad, when they are restless, when they are angry? Many children don't even know, but they know that they're not feeling too great. But they can't pinpoint what the emotion is. So when they can't pinpoint what the emotion is, they don't know how to manage it. And they can act violently or disproportionately in a given situation. So for example, somebody was telling me that her child had a huge boil on the neck, on the shoulder, and the doctor had said, don't send the child to school. The boy was about in grade 1, because other children will poke that boil and that will be disastrous. But the mom had said, no, my child sits with his own friends, in the 2 rows back and forward, and he'll be fine. So his son was sent to school, and within 5-10 minutes, the teacher calls and says, one of his friends just poked that boil on the shoulder, and come and get your son. And why would a child do that to their friend, knowing that your friend will be in agony when that happens? Because a child who did that really would have been restless or, wanted to have some bullying thing put into action. He wasn't even aware maybe that he had these deep-seated emotions in him and he gave into it. So your child, when your child is angry, does he or she knows? When your child is sad or unhappy, is he aware of that? Or is he just so confused as to what he's feeling? That's a lack. The second aspect of emotional intelligence is self-management of these emotions. How does your child act when they're angry? Are they quite difficult to manage? I mean, does your child break things in the house? Does your child, slap the siblings? Does your child refuse to go to class? Refuse to open the door in his own house? Or when the child is sad, does your child try to harm themselves? If your child is envious of another child in his class who's doing much better than him in maths or science or tennis or whatever, does your child try to make the life of that other child difficult? It's okay to feel angry and sad and envious. We all feel like that. But has your child the capacity to manage it is the question. Some people say, "Ane mage daruwa podine, tin tarha gila tek kaya gihura kamak nahe, kamak tiyena." Because as a child, the child should learn how to manage yourself. So how does your child act when they are in the throes of unwholesome emotion? If the actions are not good, you need to work on your child. The third quality of emotional intelligence is social awareness. Is your child able to detect the distress or the unhappiness or the anger or the ill intentions of other people? My niece, I have two nieces, and when my younger niece was born, my elder niece was about, I think, 4 years older, and my younger niece was using all her toys, and some of them get broken because my younger niece was
Excuse me, Professor Piyanjali, sorry to disturb you, just give me a minute.
Yes.
Some say there's a bit of like it's unclear. If you can remove your earphone, sometimes it might be clearer.
Yeah.
Can we try that and speak directly to the?
But I'm
speak
just
directly
wondering
just.
Okay, I'll try it, but let me see that the outside noises will get sucked in also. Okay, I'll just try it that way. Shobhati.
Right.
Let me see how it goes. Okay.
Sorry that I had to disturb you. Yeah.
That's
there.
Okay. So I'm taking off my earphones. Tell me how it is. Is it okay, Shobhati?
Seems better. You go ahead. I think that'll be even the mic also. Like you speak directly to the screen. That might be better.
Okay, in case you get lots of phone noises, let me know, okay?
Right. Because once also we tried, this happened when you take off the mic and earphone, sometimes and even when you speak directly to the computer, that's clearer sometimes.
Okay. So coming back to the third dimension of emotional intelligence, social awareness. So my two nieces, I asked my elder niece, who was about 4 years at that time, how do you feel about Nangi, kind of breaking your toys and using your toys? And she was like, she's a little girl, she's just a baby, so that's okay. It was not easy for my elder niece to accept it, that her toys were being used and mismanaged. But she understood that a baby girl would do that. And that's quite amazing, isn't it? So ability to really figure out another person's needs and intentions. I met a person who had come to one of my parenting classes I had done 9 years ago. I met her again recently, and she was saying, doctor, I came to one of your parenting classes when I was pregnant with my son 9 years ago, and now my son is 9, and everything that you said in that class, I did. And now my son, whenever he goes to any event, he's able to detect other children's intentions towards him. So he steers clear of boys and girls who try to bully him, and gravitates towards people who nourish him and nurture him. So those are great qualities. So where does your child stand? Or does a child get friendly with people who harm them or bully them, and they get into these relationships over and over again? The fourth quality of emotional intelligence that we should look for in our child is ability to manage relationships. Does your child have difficulty in forming friendships or maintaining friendships? Now, some people have friendships that they form very fast, so they become immediately popular, and then within 1 week, they have no friends at all, and they're coming home and crying and saying, I don't have friends. So what is the issue? It can't be that the entire class is at default, but your child is not. You know, if the child has difficulty in forming friendships over and over again. Does your child have difficulty with the teachers or the security officer at the school entrance, or relatives or cousins or adults all the time? There may be a lack in your child's ability to form and manage relationships, which is a lack in your child's emotional intelligence. So these 4 qualities are so important if you want your child to be truly successful in life and in their career. In order for your child to learn these qualities or inculcate it as part of his or her personality, you need to do certain things. And that's what I'm going to talk about from now on. Shobhavi, is the volume okay? I mean, is the quality okay of my voice?
Yeah, it's much better. It's much better. And if you can remove your mic or survey, it will be even better.
Okay.
Right. Thank you.
Right. So the first thing that we need to do is for you to act emotionally intelligently. Are you self-aware of your own emotions? Do you know when you're annoyed? Or do you just scold your spouse and scold your driver and your workers or your domestic helpers, or you go to the security guard and they scold them, or you stay in the petrol queue and you scold everybody, and you're emotional mess yourself. You don't know what your emotions are like happening inside your head. You can't manage your emotions very well. You don't know who is who out there. So you come and complain home that your best friend let you down, or your colleague was not nice to you. Do you have issues with forming relationships yourself? If you lack in emotional intelligence yourself, your child will also lack it. Most probably. The reason is that your child sees only you and your spouse, or whoever who's immediately in the household, isn't it? They don't know what is happening in the next household. There may be a bunch of really emotional intelligence adults there, but your child only sees you see. And imitation is a psychological technique. Even we look up to other people and we learn their behaviors. Most of our adult qualities could be what we learned from our parents. You see, unless we have these new bits of information and then we try to be different and we remold ourselves. So children will look at you. So if you have temper problems, most likely your child will have temper problems too. If you are always in a low, grumpy mood, it's probably your child will learn that too. So you need to first be a role model. If you wish your child to smile more often, you smile more often. If you wish your child to have good manners and say thank you, or hold promises, or to be apologetic, or forgive, or to be chirpy, you say thank you first. You keep your promises to your child and other people in your life. The child is always looking at you, listening to you, imitating you, you see. If you want a child to be kind to you, be kind to your child. Be kind to your spouse. Be kind to people in your household. The child will learn from you. One of the things that I've really seen is that children, who are these fantastic, these lovely angelic ones, they at least have one adult in their life who was also angelic. And they learn from looking at that angelic adult and became who they are. Another way in which you can inculcate emotional intelligence in your child is to help the child to help others, such as poorer children in the class. I have a friend of mine, I mean, he's in his 50s, and he was saying when he was younger, that was like, you know, in the 1970s and 80s, there were many kids in his class that didn't even have food for the canteen time. So he had noticed that. And he had told his mother. So the mother had said, okay, fine, I'm going to make your sandwiches, and I'll also make some extra sandwiches to give to those kids, but let's not do it in front of everybody because the kid might get really, you know, embarrassed. So you give it separately. You know, we don't want to make a hue and cry of helping somebody. And that really touched his heart, and he learned about kindness and being empathic and being good to people, and of course form good friendships. So involving your child to help poorer children in the class is so important. Or having your child's birthday at residential homes. I have a family friend who each alternate year their children have their birthdays at a residential home. So the children can have their own friends over one particular year. The next year is that they do a charitable affair on their birthdays. And that is so important because the children see that, you know, they don't become so self-centered. They see that there are people, so many people out there who are in so much of need. And their empathy, their kindness, their tolerance of their own distresses starts developing when they see the truth of the world. I was talking about the same parenting webinar some years ago at a school. And one of the teachers was saying, you know, doctor, it's so amazing. Some of the parents in our class, in my class, when we organize charitable events at say residential homes, whom we technically call, some people call them orphanages, some parents say, "Mage lamainta nam mama kemathi naha oy wage thain walata yanna." Api kemathi naha e wage lamainta ekka ape lamaya mishra karana. That's a very, very questionable attitude, to say the least. Your child needs to see the truth of the world, and that's what will inculcate goodness in him. Goodness is equivalent to emotional intelligence. Now we come to the second aspect of my talk, which is a very important one, on disciplining, but the importance of disciplining children. Now, disciplining is important for a child. We need to discipline children because we don't want a child to be galak just to grow up like that, isn't it? It's you need to teach and guide your child to become the best person he or she is and to be a civilized member of our community. We want them to behave properly. But it is not punishing. Disciplining is not punishing. So when you discipline a child, we want to alter their behavior. Certainly, if a child is screaming and shouting at the supermarket, you can't just stand there like a pudding. You have to alter that behavior. You need to take action. If your child is robbing lunch money or lunch packet of somebody in his class, you need to stop that. You need to take proper action. You can't just wait and hope the child will not stop robbing, you know. But physical punishment is not disciplining. And physical punishment is not indicated. So what is physical punishment? Pull in the ear, hit in the arm, pull in the hair, squeeze in the cheek, squeeze in the arm, pinching, hitting the bottom. All of these things that most of you may be doing or may have done or propagated is called physical punishment. Some people believe that physical punishment is very useful. One of the reasons they believe that is that when you physically punish a child, at that moment, the undesired behavior stops. So the adult thinks, fantastic, this works, I'll do it again, again, again. However, what we see is that when you punish a child, certainly the child will stop the behavior at that moment because it is shameful, it is painful, it's annoying. But when you're not there, he or she will do it again. It's like, you know, in Sri Lanka, when we see a police officer at a traffic junction, we are such good drivers, you know, we stop at the pedestrian crossing or what is like amber line, let me stop. But the moment a police officer is not there, we just go haywire and there's a traffic mess there. That's what happens when you hit a child. They stop because they're fearful of you, but not because they have learned a lesson on how to be a good person. So physical punishment is therefore not an effective method to punish your child. So there are a lot of effects, negative effects of using physical punishment. Emotionally, a child who has been exposed to even one instance of a pinch, one instance of pulling the ear, one instance of pulling the hair, could be bombarded with negative self-esteem long term. Such a child may be having a higher prevalence to get diagnosed with depression or having low mood. Importantly, a lot of parents are very interested in your child's academic achievement, isn't it? But we find that children who have been exposed to physical punishment by parents or unfortunately in schools, which is very high in our country, it hinders a child's intellectual development. Because when we hit a child, when a child is not studying or not doing the homework or not have got enough results at home or whatever other reason, the child's mind is flooded with anger, irritation, annoyance, sadness, shame. It floods the mind. And when the mind gets flooded like that, the child's ability to grasp important academic concepts gets lowered, which leads to lowered academic achievement. So over and over again, research has shown that children who've been exposed to physical punishment is lesser achieving academically. Please note. Behaviorally, we find that children who have been hit becomes more aggressive. So we find that boy children who have been hit when they get older have a greater chance of hitting their spouses, domestic violence. Lesser so in females because females' power, physical body power is lesser than a man's. So that doesn't happen. But we find that males and female children who've been hit as a child, when they grow older, because they role model their parents, they also go on to hit their children. The children who have been physically violated on by their parents go on to bully other children in their classroom. So we find that children who've been exposed to physical punishment are more aggressive than children who are not. So this is not a very beautiful picture that you would want for your child. When some people say, "Ayyo, what is this talking? You know, these are all Western stuff." These psychologists, they're studying Western countries, Western curriculum, and now they're coming and saying, don't hit your child and all sorts of things. We even have in our folklore and traditional Sri Lankan history lessons all these poems about the importance of hitting a child, kind of a thing. Now, I really want to talk to you about that because is it actually a Western phenomena, not hitting? And is hitting and pinching and squeezing your child's cheek, is it an acceptable phenomenon of a country? Now, my PhD was on this, so I was reading on a book called Somewhere a Child is Crying by a man called Donovan Muldridge, and he quotes segments of the Chulavams. Now, we know that Chulavams and Mahavans, the small chronicles, the larger chronicles, are historical records from our country, isn't it? So these records document particular historical events of Sri Lankan history. In this Chulavamsa, it refers to three kings, Vaharakatissa, Vijayabahu II, Vijayabahu III. Now they lived during the 1200s and the 1300s. So mind you, nearly 800 years ago, 800, 900 years ago, maybe 700, 900 years ago, during the Anuradhapura and the Polonnaruwa era. So they were kings at that time and Sri Lanka was flourishing. Now, this Chulavamsa says that these kings had prohibited violence not only between adults but adult to child. So, in their edicts, this what you call sedility, there are carvings at various village points saying that if a parent is known to hit the child, the Grama Niradhari of that village needs to bring these parents to meet the king. And then the king has an audience with these hitting parents and asks, what made you hit your child? Do you have stress? Is your paddy cultivation not doing too well? Do you want help from the king? Do you want some grains from the royal treasury? And so this king was very psychologically minded. He thought that maybe parental stress of economic difficulty made them hit the child. So that is our history. Later on, we had the Portuguese, the Dutch, and the British colonial powers who came with them, and they brought hitting. They brought public schools to our country. In those times, in Europe, hitting was okay. It was done very rampantly. So they brought the practices to our country. But now they know better through research that hitting, pinching children is not okay. So they have let go of it. But what are we doing? We are taking these Western practices handed over to us by our colonial powers and hugging on to it and saying, we don't want to let it go. So for the sake of a child, please remember, this is not a Western thing. Our country believed in not hitting. Our kings believed in not hitting. Some people also say, well, no hitting means no discipline. Okay, so sometimes when you go to school, teacher says, we're not saying that. Because there are alternatives to physical discipline, which I'll be talking in the next slide. So you need to discipline a child, but you should not punish a child. Okay. Then some people say, another myth is that if I had not been beaten, I would be worse. I think one of our politicians also very openly said that. If my teachers in school didn't hit me, I wouldn't be here. Now, what we would say is, if you had not been hit in school, you would be in a higher place. Because remember, we said about this, when we hit a child, emotionally the child becomes damaged, intellectually the child becomes damaged, academically the child becomes damaged, and behaviorally the child becomes damaged. On the other hand, if you had not beaten your child's potential can grow. You have only curtailed it. Now, you may be subscribing to these beliefs. In fact, you may be even annoyed with me for going against your belief systems. I remember we were doing a program at Swarnavahini about 15 years ago when this whole topic was very new to Sri Lanka, no hitting. It was a live audience, and somebody in the audience just jumped over the barrier and came to hit us because we said, don't hit your children. That's how subscribed some people are. The reason that some people are so hell-bent on hitting their children is because we love our perpetrators, isn't it? Your father or mother may have hit you, but they also nurtured you, they nourished you, they took you to school, they forwent their needs to send you for tuition class or to buy their pair of slippers for you. So you love them, but they also hit you. So because you can't kind of add those two things together, how can a nurturing person hitting me be wrong? You then say everything they did, right and wrong, is okay. But that's not the way to look at it. You could say, well, my father and mother really looked after us, they were kind to us, but they hit us. And that's not a good thing to do. That's the way we would look at it as an adult. Then comes, how do we discipline our child? Because we said, okay, physical punishment is a no-no. Then how do we discipline if you don't punish a child, right? If you don't hit a child, if you don't pinch a child, if you don't pull a child's ear, how do we discipline a child? Because discipline is important. There are 3 levels of disciplining a child: proactive disciplining, supportive disciplining, corrective disciplining. So proactive disciplining is before a child were to go anywhere with you, you give him the guidelines he has to behave accordingly. So you say you're going for a dinner, or you're going to a dane house, or you're going to the mosque, or you're going for a puja. And your child is going to be running around and having a merry-go-round there, and you don't want that. So you tell your child before going there, now we are going to almsgiving, we are going for a puja, we are going for a wedding, and you need to be with me. You're not going to be taking sand and throwing at everybody. You're not going to be pulling at everybody's saris. You're going to be with me, okay? So these are the guidelines of behavior. Then when you go to the event, certainly most children would have forgotten what you said, and they get back into their usual childlike ways. So they do take sand and start throwing at everybody, or they pull at everybody's saris, or they jump right in front of the monks at the puja and do their own little puja kind of a thing. At that level, you go on to the second level of discipline, which is supportive discipline, which is giving a verbal warning. Didn't I tell you that you cannot do this? And if you continue to do this, we have to go home. And you keep to that threat. You don't say, okay, I also don't want to go home, then we won't go home. No, whatever threat you do to your child as a verbal warning, you need to keep to it. So think about what you are going to say, because you need to keep to that. You need to keep to your promise of disciplining. And despite verbal warnings of what could happen to the child, if he continues behaving that way, if the child still continues doing this, then you go on to actual disciplining, which we call corrective disciplining, which is done through calm authority. So you don't have a meltdown, you don't look as if the devil has got annoyed now, or the nasty mom has shown herself kind of thing, even if you feel very, very angry inside, which you would feel, but you need to display calm authority. And then you have a whole range of disciplinary strategies that you could
What do you
use.
want for night? Okay,
So the first is charts and rewards. Charts and rewards are used for young children.
So eating,
Ask the
eating.
people to mute their mics, please.
Oh,
There's some
okay.
people's mics mute again. Thank you. So charts and rewards are usually done for children in preschool, in Montessori, where we indicate through a chart the behaviors which we don't like and the behaviors that we do like. So for example, if a child doesn't get up in the morning to go to school, maybe in the kitchen or the pantry or the child's room, every time the child does the behavior we don't want him to do, we put a red star or a black star. But when the child does the behavior we want him to do, we put a red star or a gold star. And the child knows the meaning. What is black meaning is he hasn't done the work. He hasn't behaved accordingly. Negative is when he has, or positive is when he has done it, he gets a star. So when you put in graphical form in this particular way, the child knows what that he's rewarded by a star, but still it shows a child where he needs to go. And you can take a step further and tell the child, well, how about if you get all gold stars Monday to Friday, we go to the park, and you keep that promise of going to the park. Say the child gets only 4 gold stars and 1 black star. However much the child pesters you to go to the park on the Saturday, you don't go, even if you feel sorry for the child, because why? He needs to get 5 stars to go to the park. That's charts and rewards. Attention ignore method is also good for preschool to maybe young childhood kind of era, for a period where we ignore a child's misbehavior, but give a lot of attention and praise when the child shows behavior useful. Now, a lot of adults in our part of the world do not give attention to the child when they behave well. They think, oh, child should know. How can the child know? If I don't, even as an adult, we want somebody to tell us, Piyanjali, you spoke pretty well. I love the way it was very clear. You feel good about it. Then I would do it again at my next webinar. So likewise, when your child is caught helping somebody, when your child is caught helping the mother wash the dishes after dinner, when your child sits on her own accord and studies, don't say, no. A child wants praise. So give the child attention and praise when the child does something you want him or her to continue. But ignore things, for example, the child is coming and pinching you while you're cooking dinner, or the child is just hanging around the door and the window and just going around the garden and just wasting the time. If you feel it's not such a big matter that you need to talk to the child about, just ignore the behavior. When you ignore a child's certain negative behaviors, with time, those behaviors fall away because you are not putting fuel to the fire. A third strategy, which is quite useful in, again, young childhood to middle childhood, is what's called time in, particularly when the behavior is quite negative. Say a child gets into a huge fight at school or at a party, or the child has a violent temper tantrum, or the child is hitting somebody, the sibling, for example. What you do in the time in is that you remove the child from a very volatile environment the child is in, takes him outside to the garden or to a quiet place, and then talk to the child as to why he or she behaved. So that way the child feels calm by your presence. May I please ask people to mute their mics, please? Then the fourth way is removal of privileges, which is useful for maybe late childhood to early teens, where you tell the child, if you continuing, not getting up in time, or not getting ready in time to go for your tuition class, or you keep on bullying your younger sister by doing this, that, and the other, you will not be able to go on holiday during the April vacation or the August vacation. So you give a warning to the child as to which privilege he or she might lose. A lot of parents, what they do is they give these kind of removal of privilege warnings, but when they come near the April holidays or August holidays, they say, "Kamak ne api amu." Then the child learns that, oh, I can do anything. But when I come around and say, ane, ane, amu, they do it. So you have to keep to your promise if you want to change a child's behavior. Finally, for teenagers, it is reasoning. Because for teenagers, you can't do charts and reward. That would be ridiculous. Attention ignore method may not be sufficient because teenage issues are different to childhood issues. Time E may also not be useful enough. Removal of privileges may be useful for certain issues, but reasoning, really talking to your child, saying, whenever you go out in the night and you don't come back at the time I wanted you to come, I'm so worried that things would happen to you and that I would lose you. Just tell your child. I mean, I practice it with young children because nowadays children understand how you feel. You would say, I was very sad that I was waiting for you outside the school, half an hour, 1 hour, and you didn't come. And I was very worried. And then I realized that you just was playing with your friends inside and it hurt me. What made you do that? So have a chat with your child. That will really form a bond between you and him as well. Only thing is, you could only do reasoning effectively if you have disciplined the child in the younger years properly. On the other hand, if you have hit the child, scolded the child, abused the child when the child was younger, trying reasoning when the child is in adolescence will be very ineffective because the child would have some dislike towards you and would not listen to you. Now I'm aware, Shobhavi, that we only have 15 more minutes and we're finishing at 7. Do you want me to stop now and take questions, or shall I use the remaining 15 minutes to do some more talking?
Yeah, if you can say another 5-10 minutes, then I can take up questions in another 5 minutes time.
Okay.
If you can rush through it, like
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to talk now is about communication with your child, how to communicate well. So, we all communicate, isn't it? Now, for example, I'm communicating with you, not the best way, but given the circumstances of what we are going through in the country and the world, webinar is one way. And Shobha very clearly told me, let's have me live rather than having a photo of me. And then she told me, let's take out the earphones so that I'm much more connected. So communication is so important. Children, the way we communicate with the child is so important too. And we need to get that skill. First of all, avoid talking about your child's faults in his or her person. This is such a Sri Lankan thing. Sometimes, relatives or friends come home and then you call and the puta or the dua and say, "Min ban me padang karanne, gedar wedak karanne, kisim wedagen karan lamek." Now, the relatives and the friends visiting certainly don't want to get involved in your family matters. Your child feels very annoyed and very ashamed by you doing this, and he becomes even more stubborn. So talking about a child's faults in his presence in a view to shame the child so that he will get better doesn't really work. Instead, the child feels really ashamed, really annoyed, and carries a grudge about you as somebody who shamed you. A second strategy that we do in Sri Lanka is comparing one child with another. You would say, look at you. You get up at 10 o'clock in the morning, but look at our Piyanjali auntie's eldest daughter's son. He gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning, cleans the house, cooks the food, puts water with the flower pots, studies, irons his clothes, irons our clothes, and then goes to school. You're useless. He's fantastic. Now, what happens is this child who's compared clearly will never like the Piyanjali auntie's sister's daughter or whoever. And he will also develop envy and jealousy towards other people who are doing better than him. Because why? His parents compared him to so many other people. He will also develop low self-esteem because he's always put down. We don't want it. If somebody tells him, Piyanjali, you are this, look at that one, you're not like that, we don't feel good. Imagine what the child will feel. Most adults tend to do this because they think that if I compare my child with the neighbor's child, my child will also get his act together. It doesn't happen that way. Would you like it if in your organization somebody says, so and so, look at your useless fellow, or look at that person? They don't feel good about it. So don't do that to your child. A third thing in communication is that praising our child is so important. So important. Usually we praise the child for their intelligence, right? We say, "Anyo hari dakshay, hari shok, panti palaveniya una, marks anuwag gatta." So we praise the child for something that he has attained, and that's okay. But what we find through research is, if you really want your child to be emotionally intelligent and successful and this great human being, you need to praise the child's living process. So you say, Puta, I'm so happy that you got 90 marks in maths. And I'm happier that over this entire term, you were so committed to studying. You sat by yourself and studied and all that. The whole thing, the whole way you conducted yourself was so fantastic. Can you see the difference? So what we actually praise the child is not only for the ultimate goal he got, but the whole way he conducted himself. So, for example, you have a dane at home and your child is helping you. At the end of the day, you put that love the way, when the monks came, you helped in, dishing the food. Then after everything, you cleared the stuff and you went and spoke to other relatives. You made everybody feel comfortable. That's fantastic. So you praise a child, the process. That makes a child feel so good about himself and develops his emotional intelligence. And finally, before we go on to questions, because another thing is like 6:50, is the quality of parental communication. How do you two spouses communicate with each other? If you are like umbabang to yako kind of thing, or if you or your spouse hits you or verbally abuses you, how much you may be nice to your kids. The kids also see the way you treat the spouse, your wife or husband. And that's going to confuse them. Like, okay, my father and mother plays with me, sweet to me, but my father or mother is not nice to their spouse. They are using all sorts of vile words. They let down the wife. They put down the husband. They're nasty. The child sees that. So if you really want your children to be this very strong mentally with great emotional intelligence, the quality of your parental communication, quality between you and your spouse, of gentleness, of kindness, of compassion, of understanding, has to be that much great. That will round off your child. And finally, we find out through research that parents who don't do these practices, who instead scold children, who verbally puts your child down, compares the child with another person, scolds a child in front of other people, are more prone to use physical punishment, because as you use psychologically violent strategies on a child, psychological violence meaning the ones I just told you about, your stress levels go up, your anger levels go up, and without you know it, you'll be raising your hand to hit your child, and that has gone to another level of violence, which is physical punishment. Okay, so I think that's about it we have. I was going to talk about parental stress, but that would take a long time. Why I wanted to talk about parental stress is because you find that parents who are more stressed due to whatever reason are more prone to hit children or to psychologically harass their children. Still, it's not an excuse for hitting children or psychological harassing. So I won't go there, but I think we spoke a lot of things. And as I told you, this lady I met 9 years after listening to a similar talk I had done at a workshop told me what she just practiced was just this, the discipline part I talked about and the communication part, because at that time she was pregnant, right? So she was able to put all of this into practice and she was so happy with her product, with her son. So Shobhavi, shall we take questions? I don't know, there are some questions.
Yeah, right. There are some questions that our listeners have sent. So I'll pose it to you. What can be done if a child gets angry when he can't get his way? Example, shout and hit when explained about the situation.
So this is the information given here is not sufficient because we need to know how old is the child, is there parental stress?
Simply, when a child is angry, what can the parents do?
Yeah.
that's
So Shobhavi, the thing is, we don't know why the child is angry. Is it because the parents are hitting the child? Is it because the parents are scolding the child? Is a child prone to anger? So there's a lot of things. So maybe I just some general things, and I'm sure you will have picked up who have asked this question as well from my talk, is that first thing, how is the milieu in your household? Is it a calm milieu or is it an angry milieu? Is getting angry and showing that anger in the form of temper tantrums? Is it common in my household? Has a child learned that? If the answer to those questions are no, that's fantastic. Then it's a child that we need to deal with. Then you think of how old is the child. If the child is really small, you can use the charts and the rewards method, attention, ignore method, like that. If the child is like, say, 10, 11, 9, 10 kind of thing, use the time in method, reasoning method, things like that as well. So those are some of the ways in which you can manage. So I won't be able to go divulge details, Shobha, because you don't know the final details of this case. So that's
right. But there are children who get angry naturally. They have so much anger in them, sort of, and they try to put it out in every way, like children behaving in school in a bad way, who are disobedient and who are angry with parents, even if they don't speak, the parents themselves, sometimes they have anger towards them. So how do we handle that sort of kids, like angry kids?
There, I suppose one thing is we would also want to label somebody as an angry kid, because kids are very amenable to change. So yes, our temperament can have a huge say. That is, some people are born more sad, or some people are born more irritable, or some people are born more angry. But if you use the strategies that we spoke of today, despite the child having a temperament of anger, if the parents are calm. Now, what happens sometimes, Shobha, is when the child is temperamentally, in a way, in an inborn way, angry, the parents are so scared, they let the child do as they wish. Now, that is also not indicated. The parents just sit there like a pudding, and the child runs the show in the house. Parents have to be authoritative in the sense that they have to use calm display of authority in order to manage the child's anger, either by using charts and rewards, removal of privileges, and certainly not physical punishment. So it's a lot of work the parents have to do, and if the parents do that, even a temperamentally angry child can be calmed down, Shobhari. Is that enough?
Yes. Now, for that matter, in that context, you see all the violence, protest, and all that nowadays, like children are also being involved in this political turmoil. So how is that going to affect the children nowadays? Like all they see in TV and everything is anger and violence, shouting slogans and angry statements. So how is that going to affect in broad context?
I think preventing a child from the truth of our country or the world is not indicated, because that's artificial. So what parents can do, or in fact in schools that needs
I'm sorry, but I say is like now you see it in the society. Say they are angry towards, teacher is trying to discipline, they are angry towards that. Say they are into relationships, say the girlfriend is into something, say the teenagers say something, then they are angry into that. They go into extremes. Like, so we can do it from small days itself. We can shape a child to control their emotions. So that's what I was meaning, like.
Yeah, so the reason we need to think is, why has child become like this? Many times when the child is very young, adult caregivers try to control the child with threats of physical punishment or verbal harassment. The child gets contained because the child is tiny, right? But when the child becomes older, then as the body grows, they feel powerful. And the parents are getting older. So then the child becomes defiant and stubborn. So when they get into a relationship and the parents say no, they're like, who cares? I'm going to do what I want. If the parent says you need to do these classes, I'm not going to do it. So they become defiant The reason, Shobhavi, is because when the child was younger, there would have been some hitch in the parenting process. But now that when the child was younger, though there was a hitch, the child shut the mouth and waited because he was a tiny person. But now that he's grown older and feels more powerful, they retaliate back at the parents. So now it's a little bit late. But things could be done, of course. But what can be done is kind of beyond this webinar. You need to have individual work with the parents to help the parents manage this defiant or stubborn child.
And there's one more question.
Yes,
There's one more question regarding chart and rewards. If a child don't care, what can be done?
Yeah, regarding chart and rewards, the child won't care. So again, see what the age is. So this is for preschool to Montessori. Now, sometimes, remember we said there were like temperamental children are different. There are some children who love charts and rewards, and they would do as what the child, like they want to get all these nice red stars or gold stars, and they feel very good. But some children like, who cares? You might want to use other methods like attention and ignore method, removal of privileges. They're more stronger methods. It's better for little older children, but you can still use it with very young children if the charts and rewards don't work. Okay. Anything else?
Yeah, one last question.
Yeah. There are some people who want the presentation, so I suppose you might want to tell them how they can access it, isn't it?
Right. It will be later put in our website, and we can get it from the college office. Like those who ever need it, I can get the recording. Okay. And one more question: how to raise our child in a digitalized world? Like they are so much into phones and computers and internet. So how are we, the parents, to manage that?
Shobhavi, I think that's quite a vast topic because even digitalization means so many things, isn't it? There could be Zoom technology, social media, internet. Then within the digitalization, there is child pornography, all in relationships. So it would be difficult for me to really address that because it's a vast topic that cannot be really addressed. So that would be, I suppose, a webinar on its own. Managing children in a digitalized world.
Yeah, if you can say something within so that it's complete, like you have to give it in a sort of controlled manner, or like for each and every individual, whether it differs for kid, just a general idea even.
What I would say is have a webinar on that topic.
Okay. So maybe our next webinar would be.
I think so, because you can't say because you don't know different ages of the child, socioeconomic state of the child, intellectual capacity of the child, which digital media are we referring to, so many dimensions. So I wouldn't want to give some very superficial answer, which might put people astray. So let's have something on that later on for the community.
Right. So those who want it really, we will be on our Facebook. Whole of this lecture was on live on our college Facebook channel. So they can watch it again, and we'll be having the recording as well. And so winding up today, I would like to thank our speaker, Professor Piyanjali, for that wonderful lecture, and our college president, Dr. Matthew, Dr. Eranti, and rest of the CPD team. And last but not least, our very enthusiastic participants. So good night and have a pleasant day. Thank you all.
Thank you.